Hashtag the Wanderers. The emergency klaxon screamed through the corridors of Station Kepler 442, their red lights painting the metal walls in blood-colored shadows. Commander Zara Chun pressed her palm against the viewport, watching the Zephyrian fleet approach like a swarm of silver wasps against the starfield. Behind her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, their faces tight with concentration and fear. "Ma'am, they're demanding our surrender," reported Lieutenant Martinez, his voice barely steady. "They say we have 10 minutes before they open fire." Zara nodded grimly. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding aggressively for decades, consuming star systems like a hungry beast. Their technology was superior, their numbers overwhelming. Every human colony that had faced them had either been destroyed or enslaved. Kepler Station was just another meal for the cosmic predator. "Status of the evacuation ships?" she asked. 17 civilian transports have launched successfully," replied Chief Engineer Thompson. "But we still have 3,000 people aboard, including the medical wing patients who can't be moved." Through the viewport, the Zephyrian flagship grew larger, its hull bristling with weapon ports. Zara had studied their military doctrine extensively. They preferred quick, decisive victories. They would disable the station's defenses, board it with their shock troops, and either execute or enslave everyone aboard. It was efficient, ruthless, and had worked on 47 human installations so far. But the Zephyrians didn't understand humans. They didn't understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their refusal to stay down when knocked to the ground. "Commander," said Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief medical officer, as she entered the bridge, "the patients in critical care can't survive a transport. If we evacuate now, we'll lose them all." Zara turned from the viewport. Dr. Kim had dedicated her life to saving others, and now she stood ready to die alongside her patients rather than abandon them. Around the bridge, she saw the same determination in every face. They were terrified, yes, but they weren't running. "All civilian transports are to proceed to the rendezvous point at maximum speed," Zara announced. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're buying time for the evacuation, but we won't be coming home." The communications officer's hands shook as he transmitted the message. Within minutes, responses flooded back from the fleeing transports, from other human colonies, from Earth itself. Messages of love, of pride, of farewell. The crew of Kepler Station had become symbols of human defiance in their final hour. 5 minutes until their deadline, Martinez reported. Zara walked to her command chair and activated the station-wide intercom. Her voice echoed through every corridor, every compartment, reaching the 3,000 souls who had chosen to stay. "This is Commander Chun. In a few minutes, the Zephyrians will attack our station. They believe we'll surrender or die quietly like so many others before us. They're wrong." She paused, looking at the faces around her. "We are human beings. We've survived ice ages and plagues, wars, and natural disasters. We've spread across the galaxy not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we never give up. Today, we show them what that means." The Zephyrian flagship fired a warning shot across the station's bow, a brilliant lance of energy that lit up the darkness. But instead of fear, Zara felt something else rising in her chest. Pride. Fierce, unbreakable human pride. "They want a demonstration," she said, settling into her command chair. "Let's give them one they'll never forget." All hands to battle stations. The crew moved with sudden purpose, their fear transforming into determination. Weapon systems came online. Shield generators hummed to life. The station's modest defenses weren't much against the Zephyrian fleet, but they would make every shot count. Through the intercom, Zara could hear something unexpected echoing through the station's corridors. Singing. Dr. Kim had started it in the medical bay, her voice carrying an old Earth song about wandering far from home. Others joined in, their voices rising in harmony. Engineers sang while they rerouted power to weapons. Security guards sang while they prepared for boarding actions. Even the children in the civilian quarters added their voices to the chorus. The Zephyrians had come expecting to crush another helpless human outpost. Instead, they found something they'd never encountered before, a people who faced annihilation with songs on their lips and defiance in their hearts. The 10-minute deadline passed. The alien ships began their attack run, energy weapons charging to full power. But aboard Kepler station, the singing continued, growing louder and more defiant with each passing moment. The Wanderers were ready to make their final stand. Hashtag the Wanderers. Part 2, the first salvo from the Zephyrian fleet struck Kepler station like the fist of an angry god. The entire structure shuddered, lights flickering as power conduits overloaded. Debris rained through the corridors, but the singing never stopped. If anything, it grew stronger. Direct hit to sections 7 through 9, reported Lieutenant Martinez, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. Hull breach sealed, but we've lost primary sensors. Commander Chun gripped her command chair as another wave of energy blasts hammered their shields. The station's defensive batteries returned fire, their smaller weapons creating brief sparks against the massive alien vessels. It was like throwing stones at a battleship, but every shot carried the fury of humanity's refusal to submit. Engineering, give me everything you've got, Zara called in her comm. Chief Thompson's voice crackled back through the static. Already redlining the reactors, Commander. These old fusion cores weren't built for this kind of output, but I'll hold them together with prayer and duct tape if I have to. In the medical bay, Dr. Kim worked frantically to stabilize her critical patients while energy blasts shook the station around them. The artificial gravity flickered, causing medical equipment to float momentarily before crashing back down. Her staff moved with practiced efficiency, securing patients and continuing treatments even as the world fell apart around them. Doctor, called Nurse Patterson, the Zephyrians are hailing us again. Kim didn't look up from the patient she was treating, a young engineer whose spine had been crushed in an industrial accident weeks ago. Tell them we're busy, she said calmly, adjusting the man's life support systems. We'll get back to them when health freezes over. The Zephyrian commander, Admiral Vextera, watched the human station's stubborn resistance with growing frustration. In his 3 decades of conquest, no species had ever maintained such defiance in the face of overwhelming force. Most civilizations surrendered at the first display of superior firepower. Those that didn't were usually broken within minutes. But these humans, they fought with a desperate creativity that bordered on madness. Their technical crews had somehow rigged mining charges to their hull, creating improvised mines that damaged 2 of his lighter vessels. Their communications array kept broadcasting on all frequencies, not surrender offers, but stories of human history, tales of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. Sir, reported his tactical officer, they've somehow reversed the polarity of their defensive grid. Instead of trying to stop our weapons, they're using the energy to overcharge their own systems. Vextera's mandibles clicked in annoyance. It was suicide, obviously. No ship could sustain such power levels for long without catastrophic failure. But it was buying them time and inflicting unexpected damage on his fleet. Enough, he growled. Deploy the boarding pods. We'll take them by force. Across the station, alarms blared as dozens of Zephyrian assault craft latched onto the hull. The singing in the corridors changed, becoming something older, more primal. War songs passed down through generations, melodies that had once carried soldiers across European battlefields and through Pacific Island campaigns. Security Chief Rodriguez had prepared for this moment. His team of 30 guards faced an enemy force 10 times their size, armed with weapons decades behind Zephyrian technology. But they had something the aliens didn't understand: the accumulated fighting spirit of a species that had clawed its way from caves to stars. Remember, he told his team as the hull cutters began their work, we're not trying to win. We're trying to make them remember us. The first Zephyrian shock troops burst through the breached hull, their powered armor gleaming under the emergency lights. They expected to face cowering civilians or token resistance. Instead, they found humans who had turned every corridor into a killing field, every room into a fortress. Rodriguez's team used the station's own systems against the invaders. They vented atmosphere to slow the aliens down, overloaded power conduits to create barriers of electrical death, and fought with a vicious cunning that the Zephyrians' military doctrine had never accounted for. In the hydroponics bay, Chief Botanist Elena Vasquez had armed her staff with improvised weapons made from gardening tools and chemical fertilizers. When the aliens breached their section, they found themselves facing humans who fought with dirt under their fingernails and fire in their eyes. The Zephyrians had superior technology, but humans had something more dangerous. Nothing left to lose. Every compartment became a siege. Every human life cost the invaders dearly. They advanced through the station not as conquerors, but as an army bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Admiral Vexthera watched his casualties mount with growing unease. His forces were winning, technically, but at a cost he hadn't anticipated. These humans fought like cornered predators, using every trick, every advantage, every moment of hesitation to extract a price in alien blood. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from across human space. Other colonies, other fleets. They're singing the same songs." Through the static and interference, voices reached across the void. Millions of humans, light years apart, joining their voices to those aboard the dying station. The songs carried names of heroes, stories of sacrifice, promises that what happened at Kepler Station would never be forgotten. The Admiral's crest flattened against his skull. He had conquered dozens of species, but none had ever responded to defeat like this. Instead of breaking their spirit, his attack seemed to have ignited something in the human race that burned brighter than their dying stars. "How much longer?" he demanded. "Resistance is concentrated in the central sectors now, sir. Perhaps another hour before we can secure the station." An hour. 60 more minutes of this madness. Vexthera settled back in his command chair and tried to ignore the human voices that seemed to echo through space itself, singing of wanderers who refused to surrender even at the end of all things. Hashtag the Wanderers. Part 3. The Central Command Center had become a tomb of sparks and smoke. Half the bridge crew lay wounded, but those who could still function remained at their posts. Commander Chen watched the tactical display as red markers advanced through their corridors like a slow-spreading disease. The Zephyrians owned 90% of the station now, but that last 10% had cost them dearly. "Commander," Lieutenant Martinez called out, his voice hoarse from breathing the acrid air. Incoming transmission from Admiral Vexthera. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the alien commander's reptilian features. His yellow eyes held a mixture of respect and frustration that Zara had never seen in Zephyrian communications before. "Human Commander," Vexthera began, his translator giving his words a mechanical quality. "Your resistance has been noteworthy. I offer you terms. Surrender now, and your wounded will receive medical care. Your civilian population will be relocated, not enslaved." Zara felt the eyes of her remaining crew upon her. They were exhausted, bloodied, but still defiant. Behind the alien's offer, she heard something unexpected: uncertainty. The mighty Zephyrian Empire was negotiating with a defeated enemy. That had never happened before. "Admiral," she replied, "I appreciate your offer, but I have a counter-proposal. Pack up your ships and leave our space. Find some other species to terrorize." The alien's crest bristled. "You are in no position to make demands, human. Your station is lost. Your people are dying. Why do you persist in this futility?" Zara glanced around at her crew, seeing the small smiles on their grimy faces. Even now, even facing death, they found humor in the situation. She looked back at the screen. "You want to know why we keep fighting? Let me tell you about us, Admiral. We're a species of wanderers. We left our home world when we barely knew how to make fire reliably. We spent our entire existence moving from place to place, never satisfied with what we have, always reaching for something better." Another explosion rocked the station as the Zephyrians breached the medical bay. Through the internal cameras, Zara could see Dr. Kim still working frantically to save her patients even as alien soldiers surrounded her position. "We've been knocked down so many times that getting back up is instinctive," she continued. "We've faced extinction a dozen times in our history and survived every one. Do you know what we call a hopeless situation, Admiral?" Tuesday. The alien commander leaned forward. "Your bravado does not change reality. You will all be dead within the hour." Probably, Zara agreed. "But here's what you don't understand. We're not fighting for victory anymore. We're fighting to make sure that when other humans hear this story, they know how Kepler Station died, with weapons in their hands and songs on their lips." The transmission ended as Zephyrian troops finally breached the outer doors of the command center. Zara drew her sidearm and stood beside her crew as the blast doors began to glow from the cutting torches on the other side. Across human space, the effect was immediate and unprecedented. Every human colony, every ship, every settlement had listened to the live transmissions from Kepler Station. They had heard the songs, the defiant last stands, the refusal to break even in the face of annihilation. On New Geneva, Colonial Governor Marcus Webb stood before an emergency session of the Planetary Council. The Zephyrians think they've won a victory, he declared. They've actually awakened something that's been sleeping in the human soul for generations. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. The human response wasn't fear or despair. It was rage. Cold, calculated, purposeful rage. Within hours, every human military unit was mobilizing. Civilian ships were being converted to carry weapons. Engineers worked around the clock to reverse engineer captured Zephyrian technology. But more than military preparation was happening. The songs from Kepler Station had reminded humanity of something they'd almost forgotten in their comfortable expansion across the stars. They weren't just colonists or traders or explorers. They were the inheritors of a species that had survived ice ages and meteor impacts, world wars, and plagues. Admiral Sarah Chun, Zara's older sister and commander of the Human Defense Fleet, stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable as reports flooded in from across human space. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving volunteer requests from every human world. Ships, crews, supplies, weapons. Everyone wants to contribute something." Sarah nodded grimly. She had listened to her sister's final transmission, heard the singing that continued even as the station fell silent. The Zephyrians had won their battle, but they had no idea what they had unleashed. "Send word to all fleet commanders," she ordered. "Full mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every human who can hold a rifle." The Zephyrians wanted to see what humans do when cornered. Her voice carried the same steel that had run in her sister's voice. They're about to find out. On distant Earth, in the halls of the United Colonies Parliament, emergency sessions convened as news of Kepler Station's fall spread. But instead of panic, there was a grim determination that reminded historians of humanity's darkest and finest hours. "They picked the wrong species to terrorize," declared President Martinez as he signed the emergency mobilization orders. "Every human who dies fighting them will inspire 10 more to take their place. They've just learned what happens when you wake up a sleeping apex predator." The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 human installations with minimal resistance. They had calculated that humans were a weak species, easily broken by superior force. They had never encountered a species where martyrdom was not defeat, but inspiration, where every fallen hero became a rallying cry for vengeance. The songs from Kepler Station were already being recorded, transmitted, and learned by human children across the galaxy. The Wanderers had fallen, but their song would echo through space for generations to come. And somewhere in the depths of human space, fleets were gathering with fire in their hearts and retribution in their souls. Hashtag The Wanderers. Part 4 6 months after the fall of Kepler Station, Admiral Vexteros stood in his war room aboard the flagship Dominion, staring at reports that made no sense. The human response to their defeat had defied every predictive model the Zephyrian military possessed. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported nervously, "the humans have somehow increased their fleet strength by 300%. They're fielding ships we've never seen before, using tactics that shouldn't be possible with their technology level." Vexteros' claws scraped against the metal surface of his desk. The conquest of human space should have been complete by now. Instead, his forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like demons possessed. Every battle brought new horrors, new evidence of human adaptability. "Show me the engagement at Proxima 7, he commanded. The holographic display lit up with a recreation of the battle that had cost him an entire battle group. The humans had somehow converted civilian mining vessels into mobile weapons platforms, using them as sacrificial rams against Zephyrian capital ships. The tactic was suicidal, but devastatingly effective. "They're not fighting like a military force," his tactical officer observed. "They're fighting like an entire species mobilized for war. Every civilian ship, every orbital platform, every mining station has become a weapon." What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that humanity had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had transformed their entire civilization into a war machine, not through government decree, but through collective will. The songs from Kepler Station had awakened something primal in the human psyche. On New Geneva, Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne worked in a converted laboratory where civilian scientists reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology with the fury of the grieving. She had lost her daughter in the first wave of attacks, and now she channeled that loss into deadly innovation. "We've cracked their shield harmonics," she reported to the military liaison. "Our new torpedo design can punch through their defensive grids like they're made of paper." Similar breakthroughs were happening across human space. The species that had split atoms and mapped genomes in pursuit of knowledge now applied that same relentless curiosity to the art of war. Human ingenuity, focused by human rage, proved to be the deadliest combination in the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chun commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled from the bridge of the Indomitable. Around her, the space near the Kepler system swarmed with ships bearing the flags of every human world. Military vessels sailed alongside converted freighters, luxury yachts fitted with missile pods, and colony ships armed with mining lasers. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her communications officer announced. Sarah looked at the tactical display, showing the Zephyrian force occupying her sister's former station. They had turned Kepler Station into a fortress, a symbol of their dominance over human space. Today, it would become something else entirely. "Open a channel to the entire fleet," she ordered. Across 1,000 ships, screens flickered to life, showing the Admiral's stern face. Behind her, the recovered black box recordings from Kepler Station played softly, the voices of the dead singing their defiant songs. "Today we return to where this began," she said. 6 months ago, the Zephyrians thought they were witnessing the conquest of humanity. They were wrong. They were witnessing our birth as a warrior species. The fleet began its advance, human ships moving in formations that had been perfected through months of bitter fighting. They had learned to fight like the Zephyrians, then learned to fight better than them. Aboard the Dominion, Admiral Vexteral watched the approaching human armada with growing unease. His forces were outnumbered 3-1, but numbers had never been the deciding factor in space combat. Superior technology and tactics had always prevailed. "All ships, prepare for battle," he commanded. "Target their command vessels first. Break their coordination, and they'll scatter like frightened prey." But as the engagement began, it became clear that the humans had learned from every defeat, adapted to every strategy. They didn't fight like a coordinated fleet, but like a living organism, each ship supporting the others in ways that defied military doctrine. The human ships sang as they fought. Across every frequency, the voices of their crews carried the same songs that had echoed through Kepler Station's final hours. The Zephyrians found themselves facing an enemy that treated death in battle not as defeat, but as the ultimate expression of their species' nature. "Sir," the tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "they're using ramming attacks against our capital ships. The smaller vessels are acting as guided missiles." Vexteral watched in horror as human crews deliberately rammed their ships into his formation, their voices still singing even as their vessels exploded. Each sacrifice created openings for the larger human ships to exploit, turning suicide into strategy. The battle raged for 18 hours. When it ended, the Zephyrian fleet was either destroyed or fleeing, and Kepler Station was once again in human hands. But the humans didn't celebrate. Instead, they gathered their dead and added new verses to their songs. Standing in the ruins of the station's command center where her sister had made her last stand, Admiral Chun found Commander Zura's personal log recordings intact. The final entry was dated just hours before the station's fall. "If you're hearing this," Zara's voice said from the speakers, "it means we held them long enough for someone to come back. The important thing isn't that we died. The important thing is that we proved something. Humans don't stay down. We don't give up. We don't break." Sarah closed her eyes and listened to her sister's voice echoing through the damaged compartment. Around her, the sounds of repair crews filled the air as humans began the work of rebuilding. Always rebuilding, always moving forward, always refusing to accept defeat. "The Wanderers have come home, Zara," she whispered, "and we brought hell with us." In the depths of Zephyrian space, Emergency councils convened as reports of the defeat reached the Empire's highest levels. For the first time in their history, they faced an enemy that grew stronger with each battle, that turned every loss into fuel for greater fury. They had awakened something in humanity that even humans themselves hadn't known existed. The peaceful explorers and traders had revealed themselves to be the descendants of apex predators, and now those predators were hunting across the stars with songs on their lips and vengeance in their hearts. Hashtag The Wanderers. Part 5. 2 years after the liberation of Kepler Station, the war had transformed both species in ways neither had anticipated. The Zephyrian Empire, once the galaxy's dominant military power, found itself fighting a defensive war against an enemy that refused to follow any conventional military doctrine. Emperor Jehndi Khatir, supreme ruler of the Zephyrian Empire for over 4 decades, studied the holographic map of the galaxy with growing dread. Red markers showed human fleets advancing on 6 different fronts, each one led by commanders who fought with the same desperate creativity that had emerged from Kepler Station. "How many worlds have we lost this quarter?" he asked his war council. 47 systems, Exalted One, replied General Morthek, the Empire's highest military commander. The humans have developed new tactics for each engagement. They learn from every battle, adapt to every strategy we deploy against them. The Emperor's tail lashed in frustration. The Zephyrians had built their empire on the principle of superior technology, overwhelming inferior civilizations. But the humans had demonstrated something more dangerous than superior weapons: superior will. "What of our diplomatic overtures?" the Emperor asked. "The human leadership refuses all contact," reported the Foreign Minister. "They say there will be no negotiations until every Zephyrian military unit has withdrawn from human space, and reparations are paid for what they call the Kepler martyrs." The Kepler martyrs. The Emperor had grown to hate those words. The humans had turned the dead crew of a single space station into legends, their final songs now sung by human children across the galaxy. What should have been a simple conquest had become the catalyst for humanity's transformation into a galactic superpower. On Earth, in the rebuilt halls of the United Colonies Parliament, President Martinez reviewed the latest strategic reports with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. The war had cost humanity dearly, but it had also revealed strengths they never knew they possessed. Admiral Chen reports that the Kepler Memorial Fleet has liberated the Tau Ceti system, his aide announced. The Zephyrian garrison surrendered without a fight. Their morale seems to be completely broken. Martinez nodded. Every human fleet now carried the designation Memorial, honoring the fallen heroes whose sacrifice had ignited the war. The ships themselves had become shrines as much as weapons, their hulls decorated with the names of the dead and the words of their final songs. "Any word from our deep reconnaissance missions?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Our scouts report that several Zephyrian client species are considering rebellion. The Empire's military is stretched too thin to maintain control over their outer territories." The aide hesitated before continuing. "Sir, there's something else. We've received a diplomatic message from the Andromedan Coalition. They're impressed by our military performance. They're offering a formal alliance." Martinez leaned back in his chair. 2 years ago, humanity had been a minor interstellar civilization, barely worthy of notice by the galaxy's great powers. Now they were being courted by civilizations that had existed for millennia. "Schedule the meeting," he decided. "But make it clear that our primary focus remains the complete liberation of human space." In the depths of space, aboard the human flagship Indomitable, Admiral Sarah Chun stood before a memorial wall bearing the names of every human who had died in the war. At the center, in letters of gold, were the names of her sister and the crew of Kepler Station. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Zephyrian space. It's from Emperor Jehndi Khatir himself." The main screen activated, showing the alien ruler in his throne room. The Emperor looked older than in previous transmissions, his once bright scales now dull with exhaustion. "Admiral Chen," the Emperor began, "I address you not as an enemy, but as one military leader to another. This war has gone on long enough. Both our species have paid a terrible price." Sarah felt the attention of her bridge crew as they listened to the words of their greatest enemy. She thought of Zara, of the songs that had echoed through Kepler Station's final hours, of the promise she had made to never let their sacrifice be forgotten. "Your Majesty," she replied formally, "if you're suggesting surrender, I'm listening." The Emperor's crest flattened against his skull. "I am offering a complete cessation of hostilities. Withdrawal of all Zephyrian forces from human space. Recognition of human sovereignty over all disputed systems. Reparations to be negotiated." The bridge fell silent. After 2 years of war, the mighty Zephyrian Empire was offering unconditional surrender. "What guarantee do we have that you won't simply rebuild your forces and attack again in a few years?" Sarah asked. "Because, Admiral, this war has taught us something we never understood before. There are some species that cannot be conquered, only destroyed. And destroying humanity would require destroying half the galaxy in the process." The Emperor paused. "We are not prepared to pay that price." Sarah looked at her sister's name on the memorial wall. Zara had died believing that human defiance would inspire others to resist. She had been right, but in ways none of them could have imagined. "I'll convey your offer to our government," Sarah said. "But understand this, Your Majesty. The humans you're dealing with now aren't the same ones you attacked at Kepler Station. We've learned who we really are. We've remembered what we're capable of when pushed too far." The Emperor nodded slowly. "Indeed, you have taught the galaxy a lesson that will not soon be forgotten." Months later, the Treaty of New Geneva was signed in the same building where humanity had declared war on the Zephyrian Empire. The signing ceremony was broadcast across human space, watched by billions who had lived through humanity's greatest trial. But the real celebration happened at Kepler Station, now rebuilt as a memorial and museum. In the exact spot where Commander Zarachun had made her final stand, a simple plaque bore the words that had defined humanity's transformation. "We are human beings. We've survived ice ages and plagues, wars, and natural disasters. We've spread across the galaxy not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we never give up." Admiral Sarachun stood before the memorial as the sun set through the station's viewport, casting long shadows across the names of the dead. Around her, visitors from dozens of species came to pay their respects to the humans who had changed the course of galactic history. A young girl, no more than 10 years old, approached the memorial and began to sing. Her voice was clear and sweet, carrying one of the songs that had echoed through these corridors during their darkest hour. Other visitors joined in, their voices creating a harmony that transcended species boundaries. The wanderers had found their way home at last. But in doing so, they had discovered something more valuable than any destination. They had learned that home wasn't a place, but a promise. A promise to never surrender, never give up, never stop singing, no matter how dark the night became. In the depths of space, human ships continued their eternal journey among the stars, carrying with them the songs of Kepler Station and the unbreakable spirit of a species that had learned to turn their greatest tragedy into their greatest triumph. The galaxy would never be the same.